Rebecca, welcome to Art and Cocktails. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'm such a big fan of your writing, your teaching and healing, and all your artwork that you've created. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I think the intersection of creativity, being an artist, and also connecting with the unseen is that's my favorite kind of conversation. So I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yes, and it's so funny. I think this is a gift from the universe to me personally. A little selfish, but I'm going through a huge shift in my creativity. So I always think
Mm,
of you as an artist. And the first time I encountered your work was through the book Light is the New Black. And at
mm.
the time, I was just going through some personal shifts. And I always thought of you as an artist. And I really clung on to that part of the story that you really pursued your soul's calling and you wanted to create something of your own. For our listeners, before we dive into the juicy stuff, could you just tell us a little bit about who you are in your own
Yeah.
words, how you see yourself, and what you do?
Yeah, totally. So I think a lot of people listening, and maybe you too, I've always struggled to name what I do. One word is artist, another one is mystic. And yeah, there's so many different ways that I feel like I want to express myself. I'm definitely a creative, but I find those words don't quite encapsulate it all. From a young age, I was passionate about two things, which is basically connection to spirit and the mystery. And like, what is it? Like, why isn't everyone like talking about what happens when we die or what are spirits? I was always really fascinated by the unseen and also just a natural creative at heart. My mum was a fashion designer, so creativity was really encouraged in my family. Spirituality, it wasn't like discouraged, it just wasn't really a thing. And so I went down a really clear creative path from a career perspective. I ended up I started and I did a year in the College of Fine Arts in University of New South Wales. But something about it, I was just like not quite tangible enough for me. I knew I wanted to put creations out in the world. And I just like, there was something that I wasn't able to practically do as much as I wanted to. So I ended up changing and I did a Bachelor of Communications at Charles Sturt University, which is really experiential, and majored in theater and media as well as advertising, and ended up going into advertising as a creative copywriter and art director. And that is really where I learned the craft of writing and the craft of coming up with ideas. It was so harsh. I'm such a sensitive soul, but that industry, it is so tough. And so I think nothing's ever wasted on your path. It's so easy when you wake up at 30 or whatever age it is going, oh my God, I don't want to do what been doing. Oh my gosh, I've wasted all this time, but it's never wasted. And so I really learned working with artists, working with designers, which I've gone on once I finally kind of, it was around my Saturn returns, which is late 20s, early into early 30s, where I finally just surrendered to the deeper call within me, which was my real passion, which was around intuition and the mysteries and unseen world of spirit. And I really wanted to marry the two. I'd always had this kind of, I used to write this affirmation over and over again when I first moved to London from Australia, saying, my creations inspire people all over the world. And that was my real dream. And so it felt like it was marrying the two. Now I've written books and I also do oracle cards and I've got a mystery school. And so I'm now beginning to see how those threads are braided together. Even still, I was just having a conversation with my friend the other day, and I'm interested if you feel the same. But I even still struggle to describe what I do. I'd call myself a mystic, but not many people know really what that is. For me, it's like having a direct experience. I think intuition and spirituality and creativity all come from the same place and that they're magic.
That's such a beautiful affirmation. I'm going to have to make something
Mm,
out of that. It's so
mm,
powerful. And thank you so much for sharing that. I also struggle with describing what I do because, an artist was something that I think we're all an artist. We're born creative.
mm,
We're always wanting to make
mm,
things, but then the world wants to label us. There's career
mm,
choices and business. And I too struggle with this, especially, being multi-passionate. And that's why I think I connect with you so much in your work because
mm.
you don't put such emphasis on labels and boxes and things, which is a big part of the coaching industry, I think, like fitting in
Mm.
somewhere, having a niche. And
Oh
as
my
creatives,
God,
we're
yeah.
always evolving and there's always like, life throws things at us that make us respond. So thank you so
Mm.
much for sharing that. I think this is going to be such a relief to our listeners who can't find the words to describe who they are and what they do, but yet
Mm.
you have been so prolific and you serve so many people through your art and your creations. I would love to hear your thoughts on you had a successful career from what I understand from reading your books and taking your courses, and at some point you just knew that it wasn't for you anymore. Like you mentioned, we're sensitive, the world can be really, really harsh. What gave you the courage, or rather, I guess, what was the pivotal moment that helped you
Mm.
really follow your own path? Because I think we artists, it could be like this gallery world that we're all aspiring to be a part of, the
Mm.
big fancy art world, or professional career in design, or writing for a prestigious paper. And when we just don't feel like we fit into those spaces anymore, or it's missing something, we don't feel fulfilled. Maybe for some people that is part of their calling and they have that as a day job, but for you, you really knew you wanted to go in this direction. Can you talk
Mm.
about the fear that might have come up as you
Oh,
were making
yeah.
those changes?
Yeah, so much fear. Oh my God. I think the wake up call was obviously multifaceted and layered. I think it always is until you finally surrender to it. For me, it was a combo of my goal was to be a creative director of a top London advertising agency, and I reached it. And there is, and you could be a executive creative director, and then you could be a global. There was further to go, but I looked at that trajectory and I'm like, I don't want that. And to be honest, I had to grieve that because I had to admit to myself that that was true. That was really, really hard because I'd worked so hard and really I'd given so much to that to then turn around and be like, oh, actually, my path is different was really, really hard for me. And I think what made it easier, which doesn't sound like it makes it easier, but what actually made it happen quicker, I think, was I had a couple of significant losses. So two of my really good friends died very suddenly within a couple of months of each other. And my long-term relationship, so it was 11 years at that stage, so that was like whole adult life basically, ended too. And so I was going through a period of like proper grief, and anyone who's gone through grief knows that it just hits you in waves and waves and just knocks you out. And I would have described it then as like dark night of the soul, rock bottom. It was just really, I was deeply grieving. But the blessing of was something about that made it easier for me to be honest with myself. And it made me feel like I've got nothing to lose because these things that were my worst case scenarios happened. All of a sudden, it was like my mind or that controlling part of me, people call it ego. I don't think those things are bad at all. It was just they were, because I was trying to hold it all together, they were running the show. And through those losses and through the just the relentlessness of the grief, I loosened my grip. And it also called me to go deeper into my connection to spirit because you ask yourself the big questions when you face things like death and loss and endings, even if they're friendships endings. Friendships endings, I think, are sometimes even harder than relationships because relationships are accepted. People are like, oh, you're grieving the relationship, but that often is way more complex with a friendship. So I think also because things did seem quite dark, I do think those periods that we go through, those rock bottom moments, the dark nights of the soul, what happens when we're in those moments is that it's almost like all the lights have been turned off and I remember I'd moved to Notting Hill. I was in a studio apartment with the job that I'd really like aimed for or whatever, and feeling the waves of grief, but also at the same time, just like in the depth of night, I'd wake up in the middle of the night. And there was this hope or this flicker of the light within, as in like, you can do anything now. And so that's literally, it was from that place that I gathered the courage. I'm like, I've been studying the mystical arts since I was a teenager. Literally, I'm probably more qualified in that than I am at my actual career. And I just never saw it as a legitimate path because I didn't know, again, what to call it. It wasn't a clear path at that. Now it's a lot more people do it and you can go on social media and see it. But back then it wasn't as visible in that sense. And so it was that incongruence coupled with the grief that gave me the courage to go and do it.
It's so beautiful. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that,
Mm.
but I'm so grateful that you transmuted that into something that serves so many of us. And, we're going to open up the can of worms and talking about all the universal, the levels of existence that I'm sure we
Mm.
can connect with those who passed. And it's so powerful to hear you share that. Thank you. I know that a lot of times those dark moments do push us into our destiny. So I'm
Mm.
sure someone really, I know I needed to hear that. So thank you
Yeah,
so
they're the
much for that.
initiation points. It's one of the inquiries in my new book, which is Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. It's called
Yes.
How to Be Held by Life When It Feels Like Everything's Falling Apart. And it's like, my creative aesthetic, it's pastels. This is
Hmm.
a black book. That's really big for
It
me.
was very, very surprising, but it's beautiful still. It's just very
Yeah, but
different for you.
it just goes to show these, like, the dark nights of the soul, these moments where it feels like everything is falling apart. Like, it's almost like maybe something else is at play. And I think that the creative life is a little bit like that, in the sense of, like, we all have our own unique process. Like, my friend Kyle, he writes in a similar industry to me, but his process is so different. It's so linear. We'll be on a plane together and he'll just, like, his outline, and he's writing chapter, chapter, chapter. Whereas I'm like, oh my God, it is so much more full on, my process.
I would love to hear about your creative process because I also love to write and, obviously
Mm,
paint. And I would love to hear how you work because one
mm,
thing that I admire about you, I'll just quickly share with our listeners who may not know you, is something you say a lot in your course. I'm a student of the Inner Temple Mystery School, which I love. And you always say, slow down to the pace of the earth or something along
mm.
those lines. And in the world where I feel like we're constantly being produce art, books, content. You are someone, and I'm maybe you don't feel this way, but from what I see, everything you put out is really mindful and thoughtful. And it might not be as you're not posting 20 times a day. And I
Yeah,
really, really
yeah.
respect that about you. You are the permission slip to really honor the way that you work. Can you talk about how does your creative process work from a spark of an idea to initiation to
Oh my
execution?
God. Yes, I love this. And I want to start by saying I think it's really challenging for artists at the moment,
So
with content
challenging.
being such a full-on thing. And I've got this chapter that I've written, and I wrote this to myself because, do you remember, I think it was end of 2023, when all of a sudden Instagram went to Reels and everything went to video all of a sudden.
It was hard.
And it's shifted a little bit because, like, everything is a bit easier now. But back then, all of a sudden, everyone's doing these, like, videos with subtitles, and then it's just kind of like, and then you got all the sizes, and it's just like, oh my God. I wrote this thing to me, which was, be the mystic, not the machine. And another
Mm.
way of saying it is, be the creative or the artist. Create, don't produce. And there's a subtle difference. The world, as in the external world, wants us to produce, particularly if we're successful.
Mhm.
Particularly if we're successful. One thing goes really well, and it's just like, do it again. But magic, the spark that created the success, isn't in the do it again, do it again, do it again. And this is why it takes so much courage to be a true artist, a true creative. Now, at the same time, all the ideas in the world are pointless without action. So we need the marriage of the two. It's not just hanging out in the artist space and the mystic space and the creative space without production. You need both. But yeah, so my process is, anytime I'm still, I have ideas, and it is infuriating because I'm never going to have enough time to do it. My problem is never not enough ideas. They just, like, all the time, and I just need to be able to let them go, really. I've learned that I need to trust the spark. So it has to originate from me, rather than me looking at the external world as in, like, oh, that's a good idea. Anytime I've done that, it hasn't worked. Anytime that someone's asked me to do something that is based on, oh, that was successful, can we do that again? It just hasn't, regardless of whether it's worked, it just hasn't. I've felt like I've wasted my time. And
Mm.
our time here is precious. So my process is wild and messy and very feminine. The best work I've ever done is often through writing through a difficult period. Now, that doesn't mean I have to be like depressed or something. It's just like I might be frustrated, or I might feel creatively blocked, or I might feel envious even of someone who's expressing something. And it's like, no, that envy is respect. And it's showing you
Mm.
what wants to bubble up within you. How are you not expressing yourself right? So it is this inner dialogue that I'm constantly having with myself and connecting in with what I would call higher power, but you could just call it your creative muse, and letting that speak through. Every one of my projects always has what I would call a guide or a creative muse, whatever language we give it, doesn't matter. But I'm connecting with some kind of energy or some kind of consciousness. Maybe it's part of my consciousness, I don't know. But I'm connecting in with that. So I'll often be in relationship with that during the period of a creative project. And so when I do get blocked, or I'm personally experience something during that time, I'll connect in with it through just journaling or
Yeah.
prayer or whatever, meditating. But I also do a lot of my creative work while walking. So I find being in my body is really helpful. And as you know, being part of
Yeah.
the Inner Temple Mystery School, I do think that the planet's got consciousness that wants to be birthed. And I find that when I'm walking, maybe it switches my mind off, or maybe it gets me into the rhythm, some kind of rhythm. When I do that, because my writing tends to have a rhythm to it, I receive it like word. I don't know what I'm going to write until the writing begins. That's how I am the most in flow. When it
Mm.
comes to my oracle decks where I work with illustrators, often the card, I'll always start with concepts. It's probably my training as a creative, conceptual creative. But often cards are based on visions that I've had or mystical experiences that I've had. If anyone is watching this rather than listening, just behind me is a picture of a card from the Starseed Oracle, which is called Fall Into My Arms. And it was the mystical experience that literally changed my life. I've not been to even, and I think this is part of it, right? So I have these experiences sometimes that I don't even have words for. And so I find that actually working with an artist to create oracle decks is so much easier while the energy stabilizes within me.
Mm.
And then, like, literally, that happened in 2017 and during my chanting training that I was doing. And it's how my next book opens. Now, that's taken me 7 years to find the words for, and it's been teaching me every single day. But connecting to that energy is where I've done so much creating. Yeah, so
Mm.
sometimes it's like with that creating versus producing thing, I think the balance sometimes is discerning when to keep it for yourself and how long to keep it for yourself. Because sometimes when you have like a really special experience, whether it's in a relationship or just in your life or spiritually or creatively, we can sometimes like rush and share it. And based on how it's received or what other people say to us, more different meanings are put on. And sometimes I had a therapist who said this to me once where she was just like, so why don't you just keep these jewels just for yourself? Oh, maybe I don't have to share them all. And maybe there's some creations, maybe there's some art, maybe there's some designs that we just like, they're just part of the process and we never share them, or we just have them in our home just for
Yes.
us. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so beautiful. Thank you so much. I would love to hear your thoughts, maybe to your younger self or
Mm.
even just yourself a few years ago, when you feel the pressure to create or produce or like you said, be that machine instead of like really channeling and allowing things to unfold at their pace. What would you say to yourself to help you just trust that? Because it's so, I know right now a lot of
Mm.
artists are listening, and I hear in the DMs, in the comments, and emails, like, so overwhelmed. No one's like seeing my post on Instagram, which is how artists were really
Mm.
connecting with the world. Or I just feel like I have to do so much now, just for
Mm.
3 likes. And it's just, it feels like we
Mm.
are positioned to fail, which is not true. I believe that the universe is always supporting us if we're willing to like listen and step back. Is there any word of courage or advice that you would give either to yourself or a creator that's like really feeling distracted by the noise and the
Yeah.
pressure?
Oh, I just got chills. So I would say create for yourself. And now that can be creating for yourself now. It can be creating for yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but create for yourself. Don't create for, I know it's the opposite of what they say to do with marketing. Like, I worked in advertising, I know marketing, but as an artist, it's different. They're visionaries, which means that like, no one's going to be asking for what we're creating. And so you want to stay in your potency, definitely keep sharing, but create for yourself. Don't look to the external world and try and replicate that. And then try really hard, not like cause network and do all of that stuff, but don't look to others as your inspiration point. Look in your inner vision, your inner hearing, inner
Mm.
feeling. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. And
Mhm.
also for those listening, make sure you check out Rebecca's programs because they're really like meditations that saved me so many times. I think there's one meditation you have that's actually the manifesting one with the blank canvas visualization. That
Mm.
one I come back to again and again. So just a
Oh,
quick
that's
shout out.
the manifestation chamber.
You
Oh,
had a
so
card
good.
too that your life is a canvas. And I remember
Oh, yeah.
I think it was 2020 that I just like I downloaded that image and it was we'll talk
Mm.
about your programs and your book in a moment, but I have a few more questions if it's okay. I know
Yes,
you're
sure.
so busy, but I would love to hear some insight. So for those of us who are entrepreneurs and small business owners in this space, whether it's creative or coaching or healing space, can you share some insight for how to have more faith in the business, especially as you begin to honor your own pace and go within and really connect with the universe rather than trying to check boxes and fulfill some kind of like, appearance online to make yourself look
Mm.
successful? Do you have any words of wisdom or experiences that helped you trust more? And something that I
Mm.
also admire about you, and if you're not comfortable sharing about this, feel free to skip this question. But a few years ago, I believe you said you're not going to launch the Work Your Light course anymore, and you like,
Mm.
really trust those decisions. I have so much respect for that because as an entrepreneur myself, it's sometimes like so overwhelming. Like, should I do? Do you have any words of wisdom
Mm.
for cultivating faith in small business?
Oh, first of all, I just want to honor anyone who has their own business because it's such a huge thing to do, especially as an artist or creative. We have to do all the things, and we just want to do the art. And for me, I've tried all different models within my business, including like scale and all of that kind of stuff. And I felt so trapped. I've just simplified everything right down. And I think that was part of the Work Your Light course. So I created the Work Your Light course, which is an amazing training, and
Yeah, I love
so
it.
many people had transformation from it. But I created it in 2015, I think it was. And it was quite early on my journey. Obviously, I'd had my different background experience as a creative director, which was like half of the training. But as the years would progress, I'm like, oh, there's so much more I want to say. And then also there were things to do with like media and social media that I'm like, oh, that needs updating. And from a financial perspective, I really need to get that training done. And from a congruent, people were buying it. But from a congruence thing, I'm like, I would change what I'm saying there. And it just didn't feel congruent unless I updated it. But every time I went to update it, it was just like, this is going to take me like 6 months. And I'm like, is this like, I've got so many more ideas that are backlogged. And so I wrestled with it for so long. So don't think it was like an easy decision. It really wasn't.
That makes me
But it
feel better.
was, oh my God, it was such a hard decision. But when I finally made it, and I knew what my guidance was saying, it was just, this doesn't make logical sense. And then once I had released it, it's almost like this energy or this space. And there is various different spiritual sayings which are along the lines of what you leave empty, grace will fill. And I think that is such a case. And so it was definitely the case for this, because I released it. It was really weighing me down, just having something out there that wasn't in alignment anymore, in full alignment anyway. And within a month, I'd had this vision for the Inner Temple Mystery School for many years. And then within a month of making that decision and going, oh my God, how is my business going to run without it? The foundation and structure and classes and everything for the Inner Temple Mystery School came in like really clear and really
Mm.
formed. And so I think I had to create that space. And I think this is so important with the creative process to remember that everything is in seasons. We're never meant to be in full bloom or summer and spring all year round. We gotta release. We gotta go into, when we finish a creative project, especially, I need to be in the winter of like, oh my God, maybe I'll never create anything ever again. If
That's
you
me right
race
now.
in, that's amazing. Enjoy it. Use that season. And seasons, as you know, from the mystery school, can teach us so, so much. So you're in the winter now. That's amazing. You get to rest and replenish and trust that there are seeds beneath the soil. It seems like nothing's happening above the surface, but below the surface, so much is percolating for you. So many
Mm.
threads are being woven. So it's like really embrace that, because sure enough, soon enough, those little seeds will turn into future rose gardens, and oh my God, you'll be busy.
For sure. And I really just want to say thank you for creating the Inner Temple Mystery School. I also loved Work Your Light course and I still come back to it. But the reason why it's so beautiful and so powerful is because as an artist, like just a quick honest, I always share something vulnerable on the podcast for my listeners. And as an artist, I got sucked into this online coaching business space, which was so masculine and so hard for me in many ways. It gave me a lot. It gave me the ability to do what I love and find customers and clients all over the world. But that mindset of constant production and grind and grit, it
Mm,
really wore me down. And when you came out with the Inner Temple Mystery School, at first my brain was just like shocked. It's like the simplicity, but the complexity living in the same
mm,
space of nature, of our connection to it. And I was like, what a genius. This is stuff that I walk by, these trees, these rocks, these water. I walk by this every day. I interact with it every day. And just to take
mm,
a moment to honor what's already there without having to like
mm,
put on more hats and do more and learn new
mm,
skills. And it was truly medicine for me. So I just want to thank you for listening to that
mm.
guidance, because I think so many of us have just been like beat up by this tornado of, of the
More,
coaching
more,
industry.
more.
So
Yeah.
it was like that feminine energy of, I don't even, it's not even feminine energy. It's just like, it's life. It's what is
It's
who we
life. It's
are. It's
seeing
our
the
home.
sacred that's here. Exactly. And we've been taught to look elsewhere. And I think this is what artists know deep down. It's why we're creating, we're communing with that that's right before our eyes, but we've just not been taught to. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Now
Mm.
I would love to hear about your new book, which I pre-ordered and I cannot wait. I love all your books. Tell me about this one.
Oh.
It's a little different from your other books.
It is really different. It's first of all, it's my first hardback, which is exciting, as
Ooh.
you know, there's like a milestone as a writer. But it really is a book about change and rebirth. It is about returning to the sacred that's already here, all around us, which I do believe is what is the creative essence, the creative force of life that we're responding to as artists. And so it's also about the way of the mystic, mystery school training of having a direct experience of the divine rather than like looking elsewhere and realizing that we've got it all within us. So it's definitely a book of transformation. It's a book of change. I did all the typography myself inside, and it's a black background with really cool typography text all through it, which, as you know, for me is quite a shift. And I just love it. There's a really cool, this is just a mock-up, so I don't have it, but I love doing the end papers. It's kind of as you open the book, the probably know, but if you don't know, it's the colored pages on the inside. It's just like a
Mm.
special feature. And that was a really special biography in there as well. So yeah, I always like trying out new things in each new creation. But this one also, it was meant to be released in 2021.
Oh, wow.
And it was called a completely different title. It was called Returning. Before that, it was called Earthed. And then it was called The Mystery School of Nature. And then now it's called Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. And so this talk about being in an inner winter, the whole time I've been writing that book, so much has changed within myself, within the world, all through COVID. I became a mom twice. I lost a baby, was looking at life and death, and literally soul was being woven into physical matter in my body. And so it was like I was receiving the writing the whole time. So I received it for myself and for us, because I think we're all connected as a result of it. But
Yeah.
it's definitely been the biggest, deepest, most potent creative project that I've ever done. And yeah, it's an interesting feeling because I've been writing my way through it, through this big change that I went through, which we've all been going through. It's felt like I've been braiding something together without actually knowing what it is. And as I literally submitted the edit, and the day after, a final chapter came in that felt like it was the thread that brought it all together. And so it's been this amazing kind of, I don't know if you've had this with a creative process where you're like, it's revealed to you and through you what it is. So
That's the
yeah,
best
it's a
feeling.
big one.
I cannot wait to read it. Who would you say this book is for? Who would benefit from enjoying it? Probably everyone, but
It's anyone who is going through any change, really. So there's this thing that we're not really taught to do is embrace change, and we're always changing all the time.
Mm,
And I think that what makes us really live that courageous life, that life that's really truly ours, and we're creating what we're really here to create, is the courage to trust what we're becoming and to release who we are no longer. The change is going to happen regardless, but it takes a lot of courage to be in that in between place in order to step into what you're becoming. So it's anyone who is ready to say yes to rebirth,
mm.
initiation, and stepping into even more of who you are. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I am so excited for it. Becca, thank you so much for being on the
Thank
show. I'm
you.
so honored and just so grateful. And also for all that you do outside of the podcast. I'm a huge, huge fan and student for life. And tell our listeners, how can they work with you? How can they get the book? And I think you have like special bonus for pre-orders right now as well,
Yeah,
right?
got a great bonus for pre-orders. I'm doing this amazing live stream event, Your Soul Had a Dream live stream event. So just head over to rebeccacampbell.me/your soul had a dream. And yeah, if you order the book, you can get a recording or attend the event live. And then other stuff as well as music, playlists, loads of other stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm
Thank
so
you, darling.
excited to read your book and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.